Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Marshall. I'm the Chief Reporter at Building. I'm really excited to be chairing today's session because it's a really great opportunity to hear from Building's digital champions who we first met in 2019 at another digital series event that we did that year. And today's topic is sort of about how the past 12 months in the COVID pandemic has affected the digitalisation of construction. Before I run through the specifics of the event, I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. So I think it would be really great to hear their job, what they do in their own words. So maybe starting with Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Scoons. I'm a senior computational design engineer at Ramboll, but my current role is helping to bring a generative design tool for residential massing to the market.
Nelly, how about we hear from you next?
Hi, I'm Nelly Chimesi-Mensah. I'm business projects and change lead for Faithful and Gold UK and Europe. So one part of my job is all about making sure we deliver business projects to time and to budget. And then the other part of my job is all about making sure we are landing and embedding change properly.
And Tim?
Yeah, so I'm Tim Kay, so I'm a senior digital manager at Multiplex, and my main job is project focused, and I basically lead the digital delivery of a construction project or major projects around the country.
Brilliant. Okay, so quickly, we're going to hear as little from me as possible because I'm not the one with the expertise on this topic, but just some specifics. Each of our panelists is going to give a bit of an introduction, give a bit of a discussion on different areas of the topic. Then we'll have a Q&A session. So please, as questions occur to you, please send them through. We'll try and cover off as many as we can. I know that we're going to have a lot coming in for these guys, so please bear with us. If we don't quite get to them all, we'll cover off as many as we can. If you also want to join in the conversation online, please do so using the hashtag Building Digital Series. And I suppose for now, that's it from me. So I'm just going to give Emily control to share her screen. There we go. And I'll leave it with you.
Great, thank you for having me on this Buildings Digital series as well. So today we're obviously answering the question about whether the pandemic has accelerated digitalization in the industry. And before I kind of jump into my answer to that, I think it's important for us to just reflect on where the industry was before COVID hit. The rate of digitalization was obviously increasing with, the undeniable rise of things such as more well-adopted software such as BIM, which was sort of moving into the realms of digital twins, other sort of new tech startups appearing, creating completely new services from ones that we've seen before. And also, in more traditional consultancy companies, more of these sort of R&D projects in everything from robotics through to sort of digital tools, applying at all levels, both from just on individual projects through to wider new business opportunities. But then COVID hit, and you can't deny that there was a shift. Maybe initially there was a little bit of a disruption about what could happen, but ultimately after that there was a shift and a change in momentum. Companies were having to invest in technologies or systems to ensure that they could continue during this crisis. And so it definitely felt, at least on paper and sort of in your gut, that the industry had made quite a large change. But actually, with hindsight and taking a little bit of reflection, my opinion is that actually there's been way more of a spectrum of success through COVID, with some projects actually facing deceleration all the way through to projects who have accelerated further than we thought, or completely new projects in certain cases in order to combat some of the issues that COVID had arranged. So starting with the projects that have sort of de-accelerized, there has definitely been, areas where projects have slowed down and digitalization has. And it feels like this has happened in areas where the pandemic has not hit so directly. So, for example, this could be due to changes in focus, not being able to have the same kind of resource, just general firefighting. And what it has, I think, led to a little bit is that some ideas for solutions that the industry faced previously before the pandemic and ones that we will continue to face after the pandemic either took a backseat, halted, or maybe even ideas for that were never even brought to the table because of the stresses and the situation that we were in this pandemic. At the other extreme, there are definitely those projects that have had huge amounts of success, either by creating new ideas or the implementation of them has been realized at a much faster rate than was anticipated because of COVID. So examples of this include looking at on-site. There's a lot of tools and apps that have started to, control how people interact on sites, controlling sort of waste management and different apps and tools, which have meant that there can be less of that in sort of contact on site, which not only has helped for COVID, but it also starts to tackle some of the wider problems in the industry around health and safety, waste management, and the sort of adoption of these techs was on the rise, but COVID has really accelerated that. Another area is in sort of construction techniques such as modern methods of construction. The idea that needing to work off-site in more controlled environments became a huge paramount of importance during COVID. And so the increase of thoughts of how to increase and use modularization in construction is definitely on the rise. The other kind of area that I think we all must know that the pandemic has created is a much bigger area for sort of collaboration. We've all had to learn how to work on Zoom meetings, draw up on Paint while working on a screen, all these kinds of challenges, which I'm sure we've all experienced. We've all been on mute. But what it's allowed us to do is to create more sort of technology which allows for this collaborative space to be created. So for example, my team SiteSolve has been generating a generative design platform for early stage residential massing options. And the idea here is that the platform creates ideas and optimizes for certain criteria. But what's more important here is that we were able to host workshops where design teams, clients could all get around this one virtual model, input all of their data and ideas, and push and pull and instantly see the impact that that has on their idea. So no longer do we require those kind of meetings where we're surrounded by loads of paper, having to mark up drawings, and yes, we all miss that in some sense or another, but we also have the ability to see way more and see the impact of changes much more clearly if we create much more of these spaces where collaboration can happen. Now, the sort of middle piece that I would like to introduce, and actually this is the bit that I find the most interesting, is the area that I call the kind of springboard area, which are impacts on digitalization that COVID has had, but maybe slightly indirect to what we thought. So for example, companies, in order to continue what they were doing, have had to invest in bigger servers, virtual machines, and other different kinds of infrastructure to make sure that they can continue their day-to-day work. Now, this is probably some things that people who have been working in digitalization have maybe been trying to push their companies to do already before the pandemic hit, so that they have more computational power to undertake analysis and do more kind of detailed things. And the pandemic has really forced companies to start to invest in that. Other ideas are, some of these kind of collaboration spaces that we are discussing, we currently use them now in order to interface our workflows, but actually it provides the opportunity to springboard to open these up even further, bring more people to the table, for example, through more community engagement, to try and bring more ideas to the design process in our industry. And these things have not yet kicked off because the problem isn't there, but the sort of building blocks and the foundations of this kind of technology has been started to be built through the pandemic. The other kind of area that I think has started to change because of the pandemic is through mindset and the way that we have been working. So as part of a team that was developing software, I had already been working in what we call a very agile manner, but probably before COVID hit, it was a very loose methodology of the way that we ran it. And actually, this methodology became way more important to ensure that our team was able to work more effectively, efficiently, both autonomously, but also with the ability to check in way more throughout the design process. And we found throughout this that we were actually sharing our learnings way more with our wider business, because they needed ways that meant that, when people, due to schedules, etc., from COVID meant that they weren't there, that their teams could work and still stay efficient, but also have a way of constantly sort of checking in, making sure everyone was okay, making sure everyone on track, which we'd kind of lost by not being in the same office and being able to turn around and say, how's this job going? Where are you with this? And it allowed a way for, you know, teams to work together in a sort of new way, which is based more off software engineering, or it's at least a skill that has been or implemented in that previously. And I think this change of thought process is really important for digital transformation, because we need to change the mindset that people are using and have towards that, and in order to make sure that we can create an environment that's really conducive to accelerating that digital transformation. And yeah, so that's sort of something that's really sort of important to me. And I think this is important because we are now at this point where hopefully we're coming out of COVID and the, you know, light is at the end of the tunnel. And we've done all this work, which has been great, but we run the risk of not continuing with that momentum if we don't utilize the sort of springboarded technology that we've created from COVID, and also re-picking up those projects that have maybe de-accelerated, and use what we've learned and our learnings from this crisis to really push that momentum. Otherwise, the risk is that we go back into this sort of steady state of rate of digitalization change, which, you know, puts us back to where we were pre the pandemic. And some of you may have seen this image before, and I think it is really important that we've obviously been hit by the wave of COVID, but there are lots of different challenges that are facing our industry and that will be coming soon. And actually, in most cases, they're already here, just the kind of direct impacts are not yet seen. And so we need to continue that momentum exceedingly a huge amount, because otherwise we're just going to reach another point where we have to adapt super fast and super quickly, whereas we can start making those changes and use the learnings from COVID to really accelerate digital transformation even more than what we have done in this time. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thanks so much, Emily. That was really great. I think next we're going to hear from Tim. So I'm just going to give you the presenter access so that you can share your screen.
Yep.
And also just another reminder to our audience, we've already got a bunch of questions coming in, but feel free to send them in at any time and I'll try and get them to the right person as quickly as possible in our Q&A.
Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen now. Yep.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. So just hide that a bit. There we go. Right. So my presentation kind of follows off the back of Emily's actually, which works out quite nicely. And my presentation is more based around multiplex from a project level. So obviously my job is very project based. There's kind of a set number of staff, and it's a physical product that we end with. And yeah, it's basically about the journey of digitalization and digitization that we've kind of gone through during the COVID-19 pandemic and what we've learned from it. So moving on from this. So my opinion, COVID-19 has helped speed up digitalization and digitization in our industry in general. I'll go through the reasons in a little bit, but there's definitely been an acceleration in that process. It's been kind of a slow uptake up until this point. It's been a very slow few years, but I think in the past year to 18 months, we've made some massive progress as a company in kind of getting to the goals and getting to where we want to be, and setting ourselves up well for the future as well. So before I kind of go through what we've actually learned, I wanted to kind of go through pre-pandemic and general thinking of a tier 1 contractor, because working for a tier 1 contractor, and I'm sure a lot of other people know, we're kind of quite a beast of a company, and quite kind of far behind, some would say, in our kind of digitalization and our digital ways of working. So we're trying to change that, and definitely things are improving. So I wanted to kind of pick up on that and show how much improvement we have kind of made. So contractor thinking in general. Back to where we were 18 months ago. Working very traditional methods is a very physical project. It's a very physical product, and yeah, we have very traditional methods of building it generally. We've got many highly skilled, very wise and very technically advanced staff, but they're very analog staff. No disrespect to them. They're a lot more knowledgeable than I am, but they work in a particular way, and they have done for many, many years for the most part. Silo projects and data in general, we have many projects. They're all very, very different to each other, even though they might look very similar or be in the same kind of projects. They might be commercial or residential. They're still very different, and the data requirements of those are all still very different as well. We've got on-site requirements, so it's a very physical product. A lot of the people who work for Multiplex are based on site, and they actually have to work out in the field. And I guess what we wanted to do is try and help them with digital tools, but they typically have worked in kind of paper methods, I guess, for so long now. Relatively inflexible working arrangement as well. Again, being a site-based or a site-led company, we have to be on site. Typically, or a lot of our staff have to be on site. And the general consensus from contractors, I think, is that they are nervous about working from home. People obviously there's a stigma about it, people kind of sitting at their desk not really doing anything, and yeah, there was a general nervousness about people not really doing their job when they were at home. So where we wanted to get to, hopefully you can see that, is the model first approach on all projects. We want a standard data set across all projects, and we want to see a clear and simple direction moving forward. So as a digital team, that's what we're aiming for, that's what we're striving for, and that's what to a greater extent has been kind of succeeded over the past few years very gradually. And what COVID-19 did is it gave us an opportunity to upskill staff and force that change, and prove that the digital goals that we had set ourselves as a company actually did improve our business, and actually did make us more productive and make us more efficient, and make us kind of more in line with the other industries around the world that are doing far better than construction at digitalization in general. So what has changed at Multiplex in general? First one is dashboards. So I think I spoke about a year ago at another seminar presentation about dashboards, and about how we're standardizing a lot of our dashboards and a lot of our data sets at the moment in Multiplex to try and provide them across the entire kind of breadth and range of our jobs, to be able to get kind of key KPIs and monitor and track against each other, so that we're actually kind of gathering a lot of very useful and very understandable information, I guess is what you would say. So what COVID-19 has helped us do, from a project level at least, is improve those dashboards and develop them. There's been more of a reliance from our project staff on the project dashboards and the data within them, due to the necessity to work from home in the team location. Obviously, before, there was a lot of conversation going on site. There was a lot of information flying around on site from emails, from presentations, from printouts, from whatever you want to use. What this dashboard has done is allowed people to access a lot of the information to do with the projects off-site, and put it in a kind of legible format, and put it in a very reliable format as well. So that's not just one particular area of the project. We have dashboards for the sustainability goals, for the BIM management, for the design management, for the commercials, for the planning, for who's on site, you know, permits to work, everything. There's dashboards for everything, and they're all standardized across the project. So we've noticed a big uptake in the number of people who rely on those dashboards and use them. It's forced the business as well to upgrade and develop those dashboards to a greater level and quicker, because the people on site need them, basically. So that's been quite good as well, and it's actually helped the business develop. And it's sped up the dashboard development, and it's given many lessons learned as well for future projects and productivity. Obviously, what you get, I think, as Emily alluded to as well, what you get is when you have people using this, there becomes an opportunity for development more, because the more people you use it, the more comments you get back, the more ideas they have, the more kind of, I guess, the more commitment they have in it, and the more ambition they have in it, and they want to see it developed, and they want to be able to use it to the best of their ability and to the software's ability as well. So we've noticed that. And BIM, everyone knows about BIM. It's been around for ages. It's the majority of my job, to be honest. So in terms of Multiplex and BIM, we've had a model first approach for a while now, from a design team, from a digital team, from a project level. But what COVID-19 has done is helps us accelerate that to a greater level of detail and to a greater number of people in the team as well. So number one, design coordination between design team members virtually has become even more critical, because obviously if we can't get together on site and have these meetings, what people have had to do is they've had to meet online, and they've had to use this model to coordinate their design. So a lot of our subcontractors and a lot of our consultants have obviously been part of this process for the entire 18 months or so. And we've had to do it virtually. So we've had to use the model so much more than we would ever have used before. And it's kind of pushed a lot of the consultants and subcontractors who weren't potentially up to speed with this and didn't really know as much as they should do about BIM. It's pushed them kind of into the forefront, and it's pushed them to use it and learn about it, which is obviously a big benefit to Multiplex as a team, and also to the industry in general, really. Design communication between team members has become even more critical as well. So not only has the coordination become more critical, and the ability to run that virtually through kind of BIM coordination sessions with the team, the communication of that has become just as critical. Obviously, the level of detail of the model and geometry within that, and that alongside the design coordination means that we can then communicate exactly what we're going to build and communicate exactly what we want and what should be there on site. So it means that the people who are still working on site will have the necessary design information when they need it on site, but as well, it's been very, very thoroughly kind of looked through, very, very thoroughly coordinated, and basically we should have ironed out all the issues really before we get to site. And what BIM has done has helped us do that, and the pandemic has helped us do that even more so, because everyone's been able to look at the model and has been forced to use it. So use of BIM in project team members has increased and is now a necessity. So it's upskilled a lot of our design team staff, a lot of our site team staff, and a lot of our senior leadership team as well through the process. Again, mainly because they've almost been forced to use this process because we've had to work virtually, and this is the best way of viewing the design and managing that design. So on-site digital tools, again, that's one of kind of the remits of my job, is ensuring that all of the site team have relevant and applicable digital tools, and they know how to use them to the best of their ability and to the best of the software's ability as well, really. So what we found due to COVID is that because we have site team members still there working physically on site, but we have some of the key members of staff working at home, there's obviously even more of an importance on these digital tools to be able to capture and track this information. So the requirement for tracking construction activities and site diaries is more critical than ever. Again, before this, you probably have people on site just writing it down in a notepad or writing it on a notebook. Great for them, great for their knowledge, great for anyone who's on site, but that's no use to anyone else in the business, because we don't have it tracked and recorded anywhere, and it's not accessible to anybody. So it's kind of forced people to put site diaries in a digital format, to start tracking construction activities, to start tracking handovers, etc. And it's kind of pushed the business to create a standardized platform and format for all of these things, and a good base for stuff moving forward, basically. So COVID has helped us in that sense. Digital trade-to-trade handovers and official records and QA has become even more important. Again, from that perspective, it's more to do with the checking. So obviously the site, you've got the guys working, that's great. They'll do their checks and they'll do their QA. But again, beforehand, everyone will be around, everyone will be able to get that signed off there and then. But with everyone working from home, with everyone being kind of distant, we need a way of keeping track of it and need a way of managing it. So this digital trade-to-trade handover process has become even more critical to the business and succeeding in their projects, and basically proving that we've done our due diligence and done our checks. And the last one, again, a perfect opportunity to capture comments and improvements and further develop our digital capability. So again, people using this day in, day out now, it becomes the norm, it becomes what everyone goes to, and through that people have questions, queries, comments, ideas that they want to go ahead with, and it helps us as a business, as a digital team, take those in, look at them, look and see how we can improve the softwares for the guys on site, and look at how we can improve the company delivery as well of that software. throughout all of our projects and how it will help us. Don't really need to go through this too much. I'm sure you've all seen it millions of times before. So at Multiplex, we use Microsoft Teams. I mean, everyone in the entire industry, probably in the entirety of the UK, really, has had to adopt some form of kind of online management system. So Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is. For us, Teams has obviously allowed us to keep as much uninterrupted communication between team members as possible. The big benefit here is that the project is still going, right? The big thing in construction is, you know, our physical end product is important, and the fact that we've been able to manage this entire 18 months with most people away from site has proved that we've still managed to keep in contact and communicate with each other just as well, if not better, than we did before. So Microsoft Teams has been a big credit to us for that. We've used it massively. Team management, large number of people and limited space is a difficult situation. I think we have less than 50% of the staff on site now. People obviously still working on the project, but 50% or more than are away from site now for a lot of the time. So we have far less presence on site. So Teams is obviously more critical for our delivery. And then sharing of files and collaboration between large teams over multiple projects. That's a big one. We've been doing a lot of tenders, and the tenders, obviously, we need a way to communicate. No one's on site, no one's in the head office, no one's doing anything like that. So obviously Teams again has enabled us and allowed us to work as a team, but all virtually. And again, everything is carried on as normal, basically, in terms of delivery. Nothing really has changed. So general outcomes, just to go through those very quickly. To start off on the 5 points that I started at the beginning as to where we were kind of lacking and where we used to be. So traditional methods is the first one. So now what we've got is a situation where digital tools are a requirement for all project teams to ensure that business and project success is there, and there's no exceptions. So what I've found, at least from my project and other projects around the business, is that those virtual and digital tools are even more important now to the wider business and also the individuals within that business to enable them to do their job and more efficiently and effectively as well. And the BIM and the digital processes have become the norm on the project team. So before, where we would have a good number of people involved in the process, now it's become the general process for everybody. So everybody knows what to expect going into a project. Everyone knows that the BIM process is there to be followed. Everyone knows how the project should work. And everyone knows the benefits associated with that. So yes, the adoption beyond digital job means that the improved design coordination and mitigation of risk for current and future projects means if people are involved in the BIM process that aren't design team but have certain sectors of knowledge or areas of knowledge, they can then feed those into the BIM process too to help us deliver a better design overall. So number 2, many highly skilled but analog staff. So digital tool upskilling for all site team members out of necessity. So again, half of us off site, half of us on site. We need some digital tools to be able to all keep in contact with each other and also track all of our QA and all of our design as well. An increase in understanding and engagement of digital process from non-digital job roles. That's a big one. I've noticed that the site team getting a lot more involved in digital processes now and understanding them a lot more, which is a big benefit moving forward. Silo projects and data. The importance and the quality and standardization of data has been highlighted during the pandemic to all team members. Obviously, if you get bad data in, you get bad results out. So because everyone's relying on that, we've really had to up our game in terms of the quality of the data that we put into the dashboards and how we capture that and how we monitor that and track it and how we can improve it in future as well. So shared goals and KPIs for all projects, for business leadership. And reliance and dependency on site team members on dashboards equals opportunities to further improve business. Physical product. The project is built with less team members on site with no time sacrifice. So we, at the project time at the moment, we've still been building. We've never really stopped. We stopped for about a month due to COVID and the lockdown. But apart from that, we've been building. We've been constructing. We've not really hit any delays. We've still been carrying on. The design has been great. Everything is carried on as normal, but critically, we've all been doing it virtually. So it's proof that people can work from home and digital tools can enable us to do our job. better, or at least the same, if not better, than our traditional roles, and far more efficiently. And we've seen an increase in use and quality of digital records for site handovers and construction items. That's from the site guys who typically use pen and paper. They now use digital records, and everything is tracked and audited, and to a much greater extent as well. And last one, relatively inflexible working arrangements. So quite amazingly now, as a contractor, Multiplex are looking at flexible working arrangements, and they've got pilot schemes currently on multiple projects of this flexible working arrangement. The nerves from working from home have been gone. The higher business leadership teams are now very confident people can work from home, and I've seen that as proof because the projects are still happening. So many of us will continue to work remotely if the jobs allow. Typically for me, for example, I work 2 days a week at home at the moment. 3 days actually at the moment, but 2 once everyone goes back into the office, that type of thing, once COVID goes away, basically. But it's a major step for a contractor because we don't all have to be on site anymore, which is opens up a world of possibilities. And yeah, it's possible because of digitization and digitalization of our processes and yeah, of our systems. And it's been sped up due to COVID-19, as I've said before. And last one, so projects have continued on site and on time through the pandemic, or through communication and collaboration of digital tools. So yeah, that's pretty much it. 1 minute. That's it. Thank you. Yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. That was a really great insight into what's happening at a main contractor. Next, we're going to hear from Nelly. So I'll let you do that, Nelly, and then we'll get into the Q&A. We've got plenty of questions coming in, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more after Nelly's presentation as well.
I'm sure. So can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay?
Yes to both.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Jordan, if you move on to the next slide, please. So before I answer the question about has the pandemic accelerated digital transformation in the industry, I want to start by reframing what digital transformation is and what it should actually be about, but oftentimes is not. I am then going to answer the question, spoiler alert, I think yes, actually, that the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. But I want to answer the question through 2 lenses, so cultural shifts and people and skills. And then I also want to talk about a key change lesson from these pandemic times that has struck me about implementing technology-enabled change. And then finally, I just want to share very briefly some thoughts around what the future holds, in my opinion. So next slide, please, Jordan. So when I talk about reframing digital transformation, I think the first place to start is we need to call it what it is. It's actually transformation enabled by technology. And I think this is important because we need to focus in on the transformation part. The digital transformation part, the digital part of it just enables the transformation. And I think too often we focus on technology. Next slide, please, Jordan. That focus on technology, I think, takes me to my second reframing that I think we need. Digital transformation isn't about technology, it's about people and culture. Don't get me wrong, the technology is important. It's the complicated part of the transformation equation, though. It's not the complex part. So what I mean by that is that you can solve the technology part of it with the right expertise. You can build, you can configure, you can buy the right bit of tech. But if we don't get a handle on the complex part of the transformation equation, which is culture and people, all we end up with is a shiny bit of kit that no one's using, and therefore there is no change and there is no transformation. The people and culture part of the transformation equation, it can't be solved in the same way as we would solve the technology part, because it's the complex part of it. And complex systems can't be solved, they are managed. And it's really important that I think we reframe and think about that, because thinking about it from the perspective of complexity, it changes how we approach that transformation challenge we all have in front of us. Next slide, please, Jordan. Right, I said that my answer to the question is yes. And specifically, I think one key cultural shift we've seen is that the sense of urgency has increased. The burning platform of the construction industry needing to digitize is now, as far as I'm concerned, it's a massive bonfire that's visible from space. At this point, I think that there's such an increased sense of urgency. Now, the sense of urgency was there before. Pre-pandemic, we knew that we needed to digitize, but I think that a lot of people didn't necessarily see tangible everyday reasons for a change, or how a transformation like that would impact their everyday lives, because oftentimes the conversation is very much about the technology. And what the pandemic made abundantly clear to everyone is that the more working practices we have that rely on manual or strictly face-to-face or being co-located, the more easily our productivity and outputs can be negatively impacted. That is obvious now. And the pandemic as well, in this sense, has shown us that when you invest in technology and in platforms that enable you to work anywhere, anytime, with multiple people collaborating, that is a good investment. I think there were organizations when the pandemic first hit who were on the back foot because they hadn't made any investments in the technology space. So suddenly, it wasn't that they were just simply training people and getting people up to speed. They were having to go and research and procure and then train all of their people whilst being under pressure from a time perspective and having to make sure they're still delivering. Next slide, please, Jordan. The second key cultural shift, I think, is that remote working has been normalized. This cultural shift accelerated digital transformation, in my opinion, because it's forced everyone to innovate and adapt and iterate when it comes to technology. Suddenly, we all found ourselves working from home. We had to do business differently. We had to make sure that everyone, regardless of whether you're an early adopter or you actually hate technology, you had to figure out and grapple with the technology of it all way more than previously. This meant that you actually have to meaningfully engage, so it's not like a passing thing that happens in the sort of the side. You have to pay attention, and I think that's a really important thing to highlight, because so an example that I have is sort of, we've had an internal document management system that's been around for a couple of years. Last year, I had all sorts of people suddenly sort of giving me a call and saying, can you walk me through this? And these were people that were beforehand, or just kind of like, yeah, that's great and everything, but I don't really need it. Suddenly they found that they needed to grapple with, how do I still do my job when I'm not co-located? That being forced to be away from the office, not sat next to each other, it means that where your documents are stored, how quickly you can get to your documents, having online QA processes that are quick and easy to use suddenly takes on such a critical importance. And remote working in general, I think, has normalized and opened everyone's imagination of what we can do when it comes to running projects. It's changed our thinking just at very basic level, just even about meetings. I've got colleagues who, previously would have said, absolutely not, all my meetings are face to face, regardless of what stage I'm at, because it has to be face to face. It won't work if it's not. But the pandemic has shown us that actually you can do things virtually, and there is some value in that. And again, that means meaningful engagement with technology. It's got everyone challenging their norms, and it's got everyone more curious to discover what tech can do for me, because they might have heard about Teams, they might have heard about, Microsoft Whiteboard, but now there is a curiosity to go and find out how it can help them. Next slide, please, Jordan. The other thing that sort of that normalizing remote working has done is it's opened up collaboration in a new way. We've proven that working from home can work in most cases. So actually now we're finding that collaboration can be done across teams, across regions, across countries. Now, it was being done before the pandemic, but I think what the pandemic has done is given real evidence to the fact that it can be done. And it's also highlighted to people that true collaboration requires everyone to be not just on the same page, but you need to agree consistent ways of working. Now, technology and platforms, but inherently make you have to have the same ways of working. You've got to agree that, and that's where real collaboration can be fostered. Because pre-pandemic, I think a lot of what people were calling collaboration was probably more coordination. It was bitty in terms of how they, everyone being on having the same working practices. But the pandemic has meant that we all suddenly we're all remote. You have to be on the same platforms, probably, or at least your platforms need to talk to each other. You suddenly find that, there wasn't as much collaboration as before. Now it's a true collaboration because you're having to agree working practices and you're having to figure out how you can get your systems to talk to each other. Next slide, please, Jordan. I think that the area of skills has been discussed a fair bit when we talk about digital transformation. And, the types of digital skills we're going to need for Construction 4.0 is a topic that has been discussed. But I do think that from a people and skills perspective, when we talk about the impact of the pandemic, something that I don't hear an awful lot about is the everyday, not related to technology skills that that people need. So, for example, like a really basic, how do you chair virtual meetings versus how you would do it in real, face to face? It's designing online workshop versus designing a face to face workshop. It's a different skill set, and it needs to be developed so that you can facilitate and chair these virtual sort of sessions. It's really about the pandemic showing us that we all need to be more intentional and plan differently and figure out what skill sets we're going to need to navigate the new world. This new world where we're going to be more and more virtual, where we're going to use more technology, the things that we do and use in face-to-face interactions may not necessarily work in the same way. So it's really about figuring out what those. It's really about the pandemic highlighting the skill sets that aren't specifically related to the technology in themselves, but more about the other skills you're going to need to navigate this more technology heavy world. I think that all of these shifts are really important because what they do is they help to further manage that complex system of culture and people that I mentioned earlier. I think people are more willing to try and learn and adapt. And all of that makes it so much easier for us to iterate through the change curve. And that is the only way we're going to be able to manage the complexity of people and culture. Next slide, please, Jordan. So I mentioned that there was something that struck me during the pandemic about from a change perspective. And I think a really key thing that I noticed was that actually overnight change, sort of almost the shock and awe tactic of an overnight change, can be useful. So, and by that, what I mean is having a change that happens almost overnight with little to no notice. Now, usually in terms of change management, this isn't a good idea for pretty much probably 99.95% of cases. Don't do this. But for the 0.5% of situations where it is useful and it will work, I think the pandemic has shown us a really good use case of the what I'm calling shock and awe tactics, that overnight you have to change everything that you're doing, switching the old off to the new with very little notice. I think that for the 0.5 sort of percent of instances where this would be relevant, it's a good thing for change practitioners and those tasked with change to bear in mind. And it's something they use very sparingly, but it's something for their toolkit and it's something to help to implement technology-enabled change in the future. Next slide, please, Jordan. So the future. Um, I, very briefly, I do genuinely think that the future is bright for our industry. I think that we are going to see more collaboration that leads to tangible positive outcomes that move us forward. I think sometimes we can sort of collaborate and it doesn't really move us forward in sort of the digital transformation of it all. But I do think that in the future, because of these cultural shifts that I've mentioned, I actually think that we will get some more tangible positive outcomes. I think that we're going to see an embrace of technology, more embracing of technology than previously, because the pandemic has shown everyone, even those who are the most technology phobic sort of people that just like, I don't really like tech. It's shown everyone that technology can add value and it can improve the way we work and the outputs we can produce for clients. And it's not just in the big sort of AI or, distributed ledgers or Internet of Things, but it really can add value in the day-to-day working lives of practitioners in the construction industry. I also think that the likely blended working locations model, which I think a lot of companies are going to get to, will bring its own challenges, but I think it's going to be a positive step. And it's a positive step that we will all have to navigate and we will all have to figure out how that will work. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nellie. That was really great, a really great insight. And I think, we had a really wide perspective there, 3 different views. I'm just going to ask Tim and Emily if you can cameras on, mics on for the Q&A. Cool. So we've had lots of questions coming in for all of you. So I might not ask your question exactly, but I'm going to try and group a couple of them thematically together so that we can cover off as much of it as possible. But first, a quick one from me. All of you essentially are saying, yes, you think that COVID has been an accelerator. I guess my question is, in both your businesses and I suppose with your clients, how much do you think it's going to be a permanent driver of change? Do you think there will be some back slippage once things return to normal, or are you confident that the amount of change that's already occurred will be maintained and accelerated upon again? If anyone wants to jump in first, I don't mind.
Yeah, I think there will definitely be some things that stay, for the future. I think a lot of the things that, Nellie and Tim both mentioned about collaborative working, because, we have been able to see that you can work with people from, Norway one day and Australia the next day. And it's, you can bring more people, more ideas, more diverse thinking to the table. I think there is a risk, though, that there are certain learnings, sort of less tangible learnings of, how to adapt, that the industry can make these big changes that might go downhill, and that, the pandemic has shown we can do all of these changes, we can invest in these things, it can add value, and that's the bit that I fear that we'll forget, and so we'll kind of go backwards into not developing the next set of innovations that we need to deal with the next challenges that are coming.
Nellie, oh, Tim, go, sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think to add to that as well, I think from all this change that's happened, it's great, and it's led to a lot of businesses, including Multiplex, looking at their processes and developing them and refining them to work. But I think there's a potential as well for if we brought too much in too fast, the process isn't going to be there and it'll get a bit ragged, so to speak. So not everything will stick, I don't think. I think the main bits will, but I think some of them will get a bit lost in translation. And I think it'll have to go through a kind of refinement process again to get to something that is useful.
I think yes, I agree with both points actually, and I actually think that the only way we're going to get the good things to stick is if we intentionally review our lessons learned and we intentionally go, what's worked really well during this period? What can we learn from this and how can we bake this back into our everyday? Without that, I don't know how much of it is actually going to stick. And so I think that's going to be the key thing that we have to do.
I think part of what you've just said there, Nellie, picks up on another question that we've had come in, but I will just put it to you all and see if there's any additions. So one of our audience members has said that they're hearing that BIM managers and coordinators and other digital professionals are having challenges in effectively influencing sustained change in their projects and organisations. what do you think is needed to embed the principles of good information management into the business? So I suppose you've touched on there, Nelly, you need good reflection and, you know, to reflect best on what is best practice. But do you have anything else that you'd add to that to help embed those things into practice?
I think when we talk about embedding, that intentionality of actually highlighting the things, but then taking the next step to go, how do we bake this back in? So just the identification isn't enough. We then have to go, right, here's our current processes, here's what we've learned. How do we change that and actually go through a proper change program of embedding the new things into the existing would be, I think, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess to answer that, the way we did it at Multiplex was to go small steps. So it wasn't to go everything in at once. It was to go, okay, right, we're gonna strip everything back and we're gonna change our process to a model first approach, but we're gonna limit the amount of data that we capture. So it doesn't overwhelm everybody and everyone can kind of get used to using small parts of it at a time. But yeah, it is a difficult thing. I think, to be honest with you, it's one of those things where people need to see it to believe it, and people need to start interacting with it to be able to fully understand it. And the COVID-19 pandemic for me has helped in that, because as Nelly said, the kind of shock and awe, so to speak, of everything changing overnight has forced people into using it, and that's definitely helped me at a site level implement change, or at least drag people along into the kind of BIM process and get them to understand how we're working with it.
Emily, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I think the key thing is that we were kind of forced into doing this. And so the minute that that force is off, the risk is that we slip back. And so I think it's up to companies to, as Nelly said, do this review and implementation and actually start to set some more either specific KPIs, rule sets, I don't know how they want to implement it, to make sure that their employees are doing it. And then I think that that also leads up to an industry level, that maybe there should be more being done to be like, okay, how do we keep this momentum going in order to tackle climate change, the next various problems that are potentially heading our way?
So one of the other areas, so I think we've had quite a bit there on like the mindset aspect of challenging existing mindsets and norms in the sector. But one of the other things that you all touched on, but has also been raised in a number of questions, is the skills issues, not necessarily issues, but the topic of skills. And one of the questions we've had, so I'll make this a two-parter. One of the questions we've had is, what sort of skill sets do you think are going to be most needed moving forward? And B, given the move to a more digital industry, construction is probably going to be competing for skills with different sectors that they weren't before. How can they go about being the winner? How can they go about attracting the talent they need to when they could go work in a tech company or a software company?
I think there's three areas in my side. But I think we always are going to need domain experts in our field. That's no denying. But we're also going to need to bring in, as you were saying, Jordan, you know, software developers, people with that more sort of tech drive. But I think the people that are also really important are the people that can span the middle and really use the mix of their knowledge of the digital alongside their domain knowledge to actually realize the problems, work with clients, drive solutions that people actually use for a long-term basis. Because I think we do run the risk sometimes in our industry is that we have these little silos, we create cool little tools, but actually do they get reused on the next project, or are they getting used on wider projects after the one that they're on? And that I think is key. And so really having people who can understand problems, client needs, society needs, and be able to bring the digital and the expertise with them in order to create the solutions is hugely important.
Great. Tim, did you have any thoughts?
I think on the second part of the question, I guess leading on from that is how do we drag in the best talent? I think there's a big scope for improvement and a big scope for the digitalization in general of the construction industry. And I guess the benefit of not being so advanced right now is that we have quite a large kind of scope to go at, and we can pick any direction we go in. So for someone coming through into the market now, I guess it's a good opportunity for them to get involved in that and learn a lot at quite a base level and work it through. But for me, people who like physical product at the end of the day, I mean, you don't really get that in a lot of industries. So the benefit to construction is if you can use digital technology to improve the efficiency of construction or improve construction, but at the end of the day, you get a physical product that you can stand there and go, wow, that's incredible. We just built that. We just made that. That's a big drive. So I think we can capitalize on the market by using that physical product, but we can also offer an ability or an opportunity to develop right from the very start and have a big scope or a broad scope of their work.
Completely. Nelly, from your perspective, is there any key points we should raise here?
I think for the second one, in terms of how we attract people when we're going to be sort of challenged in other industries, one is about, I think it's fair to say we have a bit of a PR problem as an industry. It's not known to be inclusive, it's not known to be fast-paced or innovative. And whilst some of it is accurate, I do think that part of the PR problem is not highlighting the good things we do. So what Tim just said about construction is probably one of the few industries you can work in and you could physically go, that was me. I did that. There's a gallery in Walthamstow that I worked on is one of my first projects. That is a forever thing. The exhibition in there, I was project manager for that. That is such a wonderful and tangible thing. And I think we don't do enough to highlight the scope of opportunity there is in the industry, plus the PR problem of the existing problems we do have and not dealing quickly enough with those combined. And so I think we have to do those two things to make the industry more attractive to people. I do also think that in terms of attracting more talent, I think we're going to have to kind of come at this slightly differently and probably collaborate and partner up with organizations outside of our industry. We need to do that better because actually chances are that the way in which the rich technology we're going to need to have and to be able to really be innovative and increase productivity, etc., probably that domain expertise sits in a startup or another company. And the model of working with those different industries and companies, I think, is what we should develop, because I think that will help us, because then it's not the case of we're fighting over the same talent. That same talent can do both.
Yeah, it's about making the most collaboratively, both like internally within the sector, but also outward facing. On a similar point about the idea of collaboration, and which has been raised as a real plus that's been able to be done remotely now, and more inclusively getting everyone involved. But we've had a question about how like what challenges the supply chain is facing in sort of this moving digitally process. We've had a couple of questions. So we've had one about subcontractors and one about clients. So two different ends of sort of the scale. I suppose maybe we'll go to Tim in the first instance, but also Nelly and Emily, the firms that you work with as well, would be great to hear about.
Yeah, in terms of the subcontractors and I guess their digitalization, their updating COVID, yeah, BIM is a mixed bag with subcontractors, I would say, and digital in general. Some are very up to speed and very innovative themselves, and some aren't. And I guess from a contractor's perspective, it's managing both ends. So it's embedding processes that we need subcontractors to follow when they have their own processes or their own digital needs or whatever else, and coming up with an agreement on that. But it's also, I guess, dragging the other subcontractors and upskilling them to get to the level we need them to be. I've noticed a range, to be honest. And yeah, it's one of those things that I guess you just, yeah, need to drag them along for the journey, really. I don't know what else to say about it. In terms of clients, their digitalization, again, mixed bag. Some are really good. Some want a lot that they don't necessarily need. Some want exactly what they should want, and some don't ask for anything, and they're missing out on a whole bag of information there and useful stuff. But yeah, I think as industry standards, I'm probably going off on a bit of a tangent, but it's more, yeah, it's unclear, I think, as to what is useful and what is not useful in the industry right now. And I think that's probably the fundamental issue with the subcontractors and the clients, is everyone asks for different things. And that's ultimately the problem, I think. So it's just setting standards, really. And in Multiplex, we try and set the same standards for every single project. So I don't know what else to say on that one.
That makes a lot of sense, sort of like embedding like what you do and also like what you expect from those you're working with and then carry that across your supply chain consistently.
Yeah, and it's about being transparent too. So collaboration wise for subcontractors and for clients, it's the transparency and the ability to let them have their say and work together to come up with the best solution for everybody than just dictating exactly what they do, essentially. That's, I guess, what we have to do.
Brilliant. Nelly, did you have any thoughts on that one with clients and other firms that you work with?
I think clients and other firms have a really interesting role to play. So I think about last year, and I ran a couple of how to use Teams sessions with a few of our clients, and it was just because they were suddenly going, this Teams thing, what is it? And our practitioner said, hey, we could help you with that. I think clients and a lot of our clients are really open to, you are the experts, challenge us, open up our world in terms of what we should and shouldn't be using. And so I think that it's always really good when our clients are like, actually, can you tell us this? And we are in a position to be able to provide a bit of training on Teams. It's not really a part of the day job, but it helps to get the client up to speed. It means that it's quicker and easier and everyone can work in the same space. So I think that clients oftentimes drive change because they want better than what they have, and they're expecting us to give them more than what they have.
Emily, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess coming from it from a slightly different tack, in order to really ensure that we can create collaboration from both a client to all the supply chain, I think there's some work that needs to be done around commercial arrangements. Things such as IP and how people can protect their own IP is obviously a hot topic when it comes to trying to create tools that embed in information from everyone. And if people, some companies don't have the infrastructure which allows them to protect that. And so maybe there is a sort of wider industry change of mindset to think about how do we approach the problem, rather than everyone saying what their output will be, really trying to align people more to about the outcome of the project. And so therefore IP maybe becomes less of an issue. But I think there's a piece around there which is currently a blocker or a challenge to really incorporate true collaboration between a full supply chain.
Brilliant. I'm sorry we haven't quite got to all the questions, but I've already run over. So I think we'll have to leave it there for today. It was so great having you all on the panel, so thank you so much for joining. We're going to try and do a few more of these with our digital champions throughout the year, so please watch this space. I'm sure we'll hear from all of these guys again moving forward. If you missed our earlier session today, we had one on digital twins and net zero, and that's available on demand, as this session will be within the hour of us logging off. It's available via the same link you joined here. So if you want to share with any of your colleagues, or if you missed anything and want to revisit, it will be available on demand. I guess that's about it from me. So thanks again to our audience and especially to our panelists. But thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.
Cheers.